Greetings and salutations, YouTubers. This is Zillafan85 coming at you like Cleopatra. For anybody that actually remembers that reference. Anyway, so this is actually going to be my first ever video upload onto YouTube. But I kind of want to hit the ground running here, basically. So as the title of the video says, I will be ranking the Godzilla films, and this will be from my least favorite to my favorite. So obviously a countdown list. You know, I should definitely mention a few things though about this. Well, obviously, first of all, this is, like I said, like the title even suggests, it's just from my personal preference, because it's from my least to my most favorite. You know, henceforth, this is nothing objective. This is no sort of official list, you know, etc., etc. You know, just as quite a few other people have made these ranking lists, you know, including with the Godzilla films. So again, just my personal opinion, personal preference. You know, so I know that I will just be upfront and honest that from a lot of the other videos that I've watched with people ranking the Godzilla films, their opinions do tend to differ quite a bit from mine. I will say that there's some movies that they have very high up on their list that are not very high up on mine, and vice versa. Some that they have very low on their list, which I actually have much higher up on mine. So, you know, movies that I like that other people really don't enjoy. Some kind of cue-ins with that, though. I will say first and foremost that I grew up basically watching the Showa era Godzilla films, so the films from the 50s through the 70s, and that is my personal favorite of the entire Godzilla series overall. So that's, like I said, that's a bit of a cue-in. And then, of course, you had the 80s and 90s, the Heisei era, which I do like a lot, not as much as the Showa era. And then, of course, you ended up having the Millennium series, which from late 90s through the mid 2000s. And that's, honestly, I saw those later on, most of them anyway, that I saw later on. And overall, the Millennium era is actually my least favorite in the series. I know a lot of people tend to like a lot of the Millennium era films, and you know that's cool. You know, like, you know, obviously that's, you know, that's the world where everybody's entitled to their own opinion, you know, and I respect other people's opinions, and you know. You know, just hopefully mine don't turn people off too much. You know, and then of course after that, now we've got more of this current era as well. You know, which, you know, the films, well, there's not too much to go by here in the current era. We've only really got a couple films now. The other thing is the list is going to go from 31 to 1 in the countdown. That henceforth, that does include the two American Godzilla films, but it does not include the new anime Godzilla Planet of the Monsters. Reasons being are that the fact that it is an anime, it's not a live action film. So I want to actually, you know, like I said, just stick to the live action Godzilla films, and also some other points to that are that, you know, it's also going to be split into 3 different parts, and at this current juncture only part 1 has been released, but along with that too, the fact that they are splitting it into 3 parts, it, to me at least, kind of essentially feels that it's more of a of an anime miniseries as opposed to a movie. So, but that's just kind of how I'm viewing it anyway. So that one won't be included. Quick thoughts on it. I thought it was okay. Part 1 anyway. It was a bit boring for me, and you know, I felt that, like I saw another review on here regarding the film, and the person that basically said that they thought that it worked better as an anime and not so much as a Godzilla film, and I kind of agree with that. I love anime, honestly, and obviously love Godzilla. Godzilla is my biggest fandom, arguably. Excuse me, arguably. Um, but I was hoping for a better blending of the two, and we really didn't get that. So I was a bit disappointed there. I am still looking forward to seeing parts 2 and 3 once those installments are released. So I'm definitely anxious and gonna watch those on Netflix when they do come out. So that's really mainly what I wanted to say as far as that goes. So. Knowing some of what we know, let's go ahead and delve into this and, get this bad boy going here. All right, so here we go. First off with number 31. And 31 is Godzilla, the 1998 TriStar version. There's not too much of a shock here, really. Actually, I'm kind of along the lines that most other people have this towards the very bottom of their list, if not the absolute bottom of the barrel, like I do. One thing I want to point out here, well, a couple things I want to point out. Spoiler alert, because I may discuss some things, that could be considered spoilers in the movie. So if anybody hasn't seen them all, just be forewarned there. Another thing I want to mention is that even these movies at the bottom of the list here for me, I don't actually hate any Godzilla movies. I just want to be upfront about that. I don't hate any of them. The ones at the bottom of the barrel, I admit I'm not really crazy about. They're obviously not my favorite, of course, but I don't hate them. I'm just not. Like I said, I'm just not overly crazy about them. If they're on TV or something, I'll usually pass on watching them, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of what I want to mention as far as that goes. Now, with this movie, I mean, obviously, I can't really say much more than what's already been said about this. This was the Roland Emmerich Godzilla, and Toho actually changed the name of the monster to Zilla, and fans even dubbed him as Gino or Godzilla in name only. And I certainly agree with that. I really can't stand the design of this Godzilla. Does not look representative of what Godzilla is supposed to look like at all. I'm totally on board with everyone who states that. It was a movie that I was really looking forward to seeing when it came out. I saw it in theaters, and I already knew ahead of time what the design was, but I was still having high hopes, and I don't know, just the design just really threw me off, as it did for most people. The movie itself wasn't terrible. Obviously, they were ripping off of and trying to cash in on the success of Jurassic Park a lot, especially with the baby Godzilla scenes. Obviously copying off of the Velociraptors, but some of the human characters weren't too bad, like Matthew Broderick. His role was okay. Jean Reno's role as the French investigator, he was probably the best human character in the movie, I would say. So there were definitely some positives. Had some, as far as a monster movie goes, it wasn't too bad. It was pretty enjoyable. It just really didn't work as a Godzilla film. And the biggest slap in the face was the way that they killed Godzilla off at the end of the movie with the military fighter jets firing missiles at him and taking him down. That was absurd. That's just, come on, man. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, to put it that way. Obviously, you guys just don't know what Godzilla is supposed to be. Him getting killed by conventional weapons is the polar opposite of what it's really supposed to entail. So, that to me was a major, thing that really turned me off to the film. So amongst a lot of other things, but like I said, that's pretty much it with that. Let's keep rolling on with this. So now we're gonna hit number and that is Godzilla versus Megaguirus. Now, as I already stated, the Millennium Era Godzilla films are my least favorite in the franchise. Um, excuse me. This one, though, as far as the Millennium Era films go, this was definitely the worst of them, in my opinion. I just felt, because a few of these films, including this one, had kind of a similar kind of story pattern and similar characters, so it started feeling a little redundant as you watch these movies. But this one, the execution on this, I thought was not done as well as some of the other Millennium Era films. I did like the fact that they brought back the Mega Nulon, which originally appeared in Rodan, and that was released in 1956, the original Rodan. And I thought that was cool that they brought them back, and then obviously showed their evolved forms of the Mega Nula. And then, of course, Megaguirus herself. She was a pretty cool monster. She had some pretty cool attacks, including her sonic wing flap. And it was kind of an interesting fight with Godzilla. And the one thing I'll say here with Godzilla is I don't really... to be honest with you, I know a lot of people do like the Millennium design of Godzilla that we see, like here and from Godzilla 2000. But this Millennium design, actually, I honestly... don't throw tomatoes at me, but I really don't care for the design, honestly. I don't like the super elongated snout, and I don't like the overly elongated spikes, or dorsal fins or spines, whatever you want to call them. I usually refer to them as spikes. Just not my just not really my my thingy thing, not my cup of tea. So. So that's kind of how I personally feel as far as the Millennium Era Godzilla design goes. But other than that, though, I mean, like I said, I had some cool things about it, and one thing I liked as far as when the with the military goes was the development of the black hole gun. That was actually a pretty cool concept, and even though it wasn't, at least it seemed like in the end of the movie, wasn't really used fully effectively, but it was still a really cool weapon that they developed for the movie. So let's keep it moving. Number 29, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. This one, like I said, kind of falls in that pattern with Megaguirus, but the execution on this was a bit better. This version of Mechagodzilla, or Kiryu, if you will, I usually just refer to him as Mechagodzilla still. I happen to like the design on this. It looks really, really awesome. I don't quite like it as much as the Showa era Mechagodzilla, which is my personal favorite version of Mechagodzilla. But I do like it more than the Heisei design. That would be my least favorite, obviously. And the whole concept behind this Mechagodzilla, that it was basically built and designed, originally taking the bones from the original Godzilla, which were buried under the sea, from 1954, and so that was a really cool concept, very interesting. That's something I did happen to really like, even though, as we all know, or at least any of us that followed the movies know, there was a bit of a continuity error. The fact that the bones in the original Godzilla movie evaporated at the end, but what you gonna do? So, but otherwise it was pretty cool. Mechagodzilla here had some pretty cool attacks, especially the Absolute Zero Cannon, and it was a pretty good fight against Godzilla. And the design here of Godzilla, though certainly not my favorite, once again, but I do like it more than the 2000 / Megaguirus design. So I will say that. And so this was a step above. Obviously, still not my favorite, but so let's keep going on. Number 28, Godzilla Tokyo SOS. So this one I have ranked slightly higher than the predecessor, which was the previous movie. An interesting note here: Godzilla Tokyo SOS was actually a follow-up. Um, to the previous entry, and that was a bit unique for the Millennium era. I meant to say, because there wasn't really any continuity amongst the films. They usually would reference the original Godzilla, and then pretty much nothing in between. At least for the most part, anyways. But this one actually follows up from the previous entry and continues the story on. So that's one thing I kind of liked with that, because I do like a little bit of continuity. Um, and you even get to see Godzilla's scar from the previous battle against Mechagodzilla. And certainly a nice addition was the fact that they brought Mothra in for this movie. And I'm definitely a big-time Mothra fan. I love her as a kaiju. So it was really cool to see her there. And they even had the Twin Fairies, which I always liked them as well. So those were some nice additions. The human characters were a little more enjoyable than the previous film, or at least I felt so. And and they even brought back the actor from the original 1961 Mothra, and he reprised his same role, and that was definitely cool to see. So there was some good aspects of it. Again, not my favorite, but there was some stuff that I enjoyed from it. So let's keep going. Number 27, Shin Godzilla. And I know this one's had some mixed reviews. I do see, or I have seen a lot of other people have had this pretty low on their list, and I kind of agree with that too. For me, just the main complaint here, and like a lot of people kind of noted, I just felt that the movie, it was long and kind of drawn out, but because it was very boring though. A lot of it, there's a lot of just a lot of political stuff just going on, a lot of banter basically, about what to do about the situation. I kind of appreciate that it's a unique concept, but to me though, it was kind of boring. At least though the monster action did make up for it. Godzilla's design was really cool. I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. He had that sort of grotesque look in his final form in the movie. The previous forms, well, you didn't really get to see the first form under the water, but the second and third forms that you did see, I wasn't too crazy about those, but I did like his final form, and they added a lot of additional beam weapons that he was able to use aside from just his atomic breath. So that was kind of interesting to see, and the monster action was was definitely what made the movie worth it. I did see this in theaters when it was originally released, and obviously it was only in Japanese with the English subtitles. And for me personally, and people who who are in my close-knit group that know me, know that to be honest with you, I've always preferred the English dubs. Don't yell at me too much for that, but it's just that's what I grew up watching. Basically, I grew up watching the English dubs of the Godzilla movies, and also with anime and foreign martial arts films, which I'm also really into. I always watch the English dubs of those as well. Like I said, that's just what I grew up with. That's what I'm accustomed to. So that's kind of what I prefer. But it wasn't so much here that I had to watch it with the subtitles. It was just the fact that there was so much stuff that they were throwing on the screen at the same time that you're trying to read the subtitles of what's going on. The fact that they're like captioning every little piece of information here, and it just got it just drove me nuts after a while, honestly. And even with after the fact, getting the movie on the DVD Blu-ray combo set, so I can maintain my full collection here. I watched the English dub of it, and still it still drove me nuts at times with all the stuff being captioned on the screen. I mean, it's like I almost, it almost seemed like they were having a caption for, for the prime minister's pen on his desk, and it got a little absurd. So those were some of my gripes with the film, but like I said, the monster action did make up for some of the more negative points that I felt that it had. So let's carry on. And I apologize, by the way, that I'm not thinking of more interesting segues here, but what you gonna do? Number 26, Godzilla, the 2014 version. This is obviously the legendary Godzilla. I do rate this a step above Shin Godzilla. I liked it a little bit more. The main human protagonist, the kid from Kick-Ass, he wasn't the best. I really, like a lot of people said, wish that they did not kill off Bryan Cranston's character, because he was awesome as always, and that and from the trailers I thought that he was going to be the main focus of the film. So, and I wish that he was, him along with Ken Watanabe. I thought the two of them would have been better as the main human focuses of the film. Also, as a lot of people complain with the monster action, the fact that it's limited, especially Godzilla screen time. Then a lot of times when you do show monster action, then they cut away to like a news broadcast of it or something like that, and that kind of was something I really wasn't crazy about. I did obviously hear that for Godzilla 2, King of the Monsters, that they are, that will be released next year, that it is going to be a lot more focused on the monster action. It's going to be more similar to Kong Skull Island from what I understand, and that's something I'm definitely looking forward to and have high hopes for, because I did like at least Kong Skull Island I liked for the monster action. The story wasn't great, but the monster action certainly made up for that. So I'm definitely anticipating that next year, as well as Godzilla vs. Kong coming out in 2020. So those were some of my gripes with the film, but like I said, it did, they did do some things right here, at least this time, with making the American-made Godzilla film, that they actually got Godzilla's design to look pretty accurate, and so definitely a big step up from the '98 Godzilla. So, moving along. Now this one, I know a lot of people are not going to be happy with me here. Number 25, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack. And I do apologize up front because I know a lot of people have this, in their top 10 or even their top 5 favorite Godzilla films. For me, though, I never really felt it that way. Like I said, it just kind of falls in more of that Millennium mold, which I'm not really too crazy about these films. I do like this one a little bit more, obviously, than some of the other ones that I already mentioned on the list. But just kind of the fact that like Godzilla this time was basically spawned by the souls of those who died during World War II. It just seemed like that origin kind of strayed a little too much from Ishiro Honda's original concept of Godzilla. So and it went into like that supernatural element. So I just was never overly big on that. Godzilla's design is really cool here. I definitely do like this design. It's not my favorite of the Millennium era, but it's one that I really like. And he looks very demonic and very menacing here, and it's pretty nicely done. The other monster designs in the movie I'm not overly crazy about, to be honest with you. I'm not really too crazy about Mothra or King Ghidorah's or Baragon's designs, and Baragon as well. I liked his Showa era roar as well better than the roar that they gave him here. So there was a couple drawbacks to Baragon, and the fact that he didn't put up much of a fight, which brings me to the other point, was the fact that Godzilla just was way too overpowered in this film, especially when competing against heavyweights such as Mothra and his arch rival, essentially, in King Ghidorah. You know, I do know and I understand that originally Mothra and King Ghidorah's roles were going to be intended for Varan and Anguirus instead. And then, of course, they replaced them with Mothra and King Ghidorah, who were more popular kaiju. So I understand where they were coming from at that point, but they didn't really retool the story you know what I mean, to accompany for that. So or you know, to account for that. So it just gave off the presence of Godzilla being too overpowered for my liking, and it made the fight scenes, you know, the monster battle scenes, a little underwhelming. I'll be honest with you. At least that's how I felt. The human characters were pretty good though. Yuri, you know, the main protagonist, she was a pretty interesting character and had that interesting relationship with her father, who was a military man and really just trying to protect his country in however way possible. So, you know, and then she's trying to convince him that the Guardian monsters, you know, were there to aid them in stopping Godzilla. So that some of that stuff was pretty interesting, and I liked his sub that he was in, the subset Suma. That was pretty cool. Not my favorite of the military weapons, but one that I definitely like. So that's kind of my take on it, you know. And again, I do apologize because I know a lot of people have this very high up on their list, but this is just for me personally where I place it. So let's continue on. Number 24, Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. Now, from the Heisei era, which, like I said, I do really like the Heisei era films, not as much as the Showa era. But, you know, as far as these films go, this would be my least favorite in the Heisei era. You know, I just thought the story was the poorest of all the Heisei films, which a lot of other people did say as well. I did like Space Godzilla a lot, though. He's a really awesome monster in both design and concept, you know, especially being created from the cells and particles of Godzilla that, you know, that flew out into outer space, basically particles of Biollante that traveled into outer space, and then of course cells that were attached to Mothra of Godzilla's that fell off of her when she ventured into outer space, and those cells basically were sucked into a black hole, merged with that crystalline object, and flushed out through a white hole and formed Space Godzilla, basically. So that was pretty interesting. I like that, and they brought back the Mecha Mogera. Was a kind of an interesting choice. You know, it was pretty cool. Not awesome for a mecha. But I did like Mogera. Obviously, first appeared in the Mysterians, so it was a bit of an interesting choice to bring it in. And then of course they also had Little Godzilla, and this version, Little Godzilla, actually I really like him a lot, and he's very cute. I like this version better than Minya, you know, and I don't have anything against Minya, but I kind of like the way they portrayed Little Godzilla better, you know, as far as like what you would want to see from basically, you know, a toddler Godzilla. This is you know, better done than what they did with Minya, I think. Like I said, I like Minya too, but I like Little Godzilla better, and that kind of made me sad when he got kidnapped by Space Godzilla, but then I was happy at the end when he was freed and blowing his atomic bubbles. So let's go ahead and continue on then. Oh, and excuse me though. Before I continue on, I do want to say one other thing. I'm sorry about the film is the fact too that they focused a lot more on Megumi Odaka's character of Miki Sagusa, the girl who was in most of the Heisei films, who had the ESP powers and was able to basically, like communicate with Godzilla, etc., etc. And I liked that fact that they did focus on her a lot more because she was a character that I always found interesting and always enjoyed. So it was nice to see her get a much bigger focal point this time around. So that's another positive here. All right, now this time we are going to really continue on. Number 23, Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, otherwise known as Godzilla versus Hedra. Uh, from the Showa era, even though, like I said, overall the Showa era is my favorite, um, this would be my least favorite of the Showa era, honestly. I know some people have it a little bit higher on their list, some others don't. Um, you know, I like the weird and zaniness of the Showa era because that fits in with my personality to a T. But this one was a bit out there, especially with the whole psychedelic drug trip feel that it had on it, which I know was a product of its time. But for a Godzilla film, that was a bit much even, and had like those weird cartoon sequences, which were kind of strange. The little boy Ken, I believe his name was. He was a pretty decent character in the film, and he was the one trying to convince everybody that Godzilla was there to save him because he knew Godzilla was now shifted into that hero role, and that was actually. Something I never minded. I really didn't have a preference whether Godzilla was a hero or a villain. I liked him as both, just to be honest with you. Um, Hedru was kind of a gross monster made from pollution and spewing his waste on Godzilla. Made for some kind of gross fights, but still pretty cool. Kind of some jarring, scary scenes when one of the first, if not the first time, when you see humans dying on film when Hedra's flying over and his toxic waste that's released, basically suffocates and kills people and turns them into skeletons after. That was kind of intense. And like I said, the weird battle he had with Godzilla. But of course, we did get to see the infamous Godzilla flying scene, and that was just. Oh, that was just fabulous. I freaking love that. So that's really what I've got to say as far as that goes. So let's continue on. Number 22, Godzilla versus Megalon. This one, again, a bit out there, a bit of a kooky, kind of silly kind of film. So not overly my favorite, but I do obviously enjoy it. Megalon was a pretty cool kaiju. Not my favorite, but I kind of liked him. And then of course you had the people of Seatopia that unleashed him. Basically to get revenge against the humans for atomic testing and what have you, and they even teamed up with the aliens from Nebula Space Hunter M, contacting them to send Gigan to aid Megalon, in the battle here, which was pretty cool, because I freaking love Gigan, definitely. Among my favorite kaiju, which, by the way, I would like to, in a future installment, a future video, would like to maybe make a top 10 list of my favorite kaiju. So that's just kind of something I'm definitely thinking about doing in the future. But anyways, as far as this goes, so in that part. So that the two of them teaming up, that was pretty awesome. And of course, we cannot forget Jet Jaguar, the robotic monster, or mecha, if you will, in this case. And I absolutely love Jet Jaguar. He is so awesome. I mean, you just cannot describe how awesome Jet Jaguar is. And it was a really cool team up with Godzilla. And obviously, the scenes with Godzilla were a bit rushed because originally he wasn't even intended to be in the film. Henceforth the suit design, which I think is called the Megaro Goji, not really my not really one that I like here with the really soft looking eyes, and just did not look, did not really make him look tough at all. So, but nonetheless, though, we got some great monster action, with Godzilla and Jet Jaguar teaming up against Megalon and Gigan, and you got to see another famous scene with the physics and science defying drop kicks that Godzilla went ahead and performed in the movie, and that was great. And then, of course, Jet Jaguar's theme song to me is legendary, and my friend and I still always sit around singing Jet Jaguar songs. So, yep, like I said, I'm weird. So, all right, so let's go ahead and move along. Number 21, Godzilla vs. Mothra: The Battle for Earth. This one was an okay movie of the Heisei era. Obviously not my favorite, but it was pretty enjoyable, though. Still, the introduction of Batra here. Batra's a really awesome kaiju. I really like him a lot. Basically, like the evil version of Mothra, or essentially the evil version of Mothra, anyways. And he had an awesome theme, which, of course, composed by Akira Ifukube, and pretty much all the music composed by Akira Ifukube is absolutely legendary and amazing. I love all of his themes. So it made for an interesting new take, as far as Mothra goes. Obviously, you had the Mothra fairies back in the movie as well. Like I said, I always like seeing them show up. And then an interesting twist at the end when Batra ends up joining forces with Mothra to stop Godzilla. So, so that was pretty cool to see, and I definitely liked it. The human characters were kind of hit and miss. But it still didn't really take away from the monster action. And that, to me, is always going to be the most important part of a Godzilla movie. All right, carrying on. Number 20, Godzilla 2000. Now, as you can see, I've got this ranked basically a step above a lot of the other Millennium Era films. This isn't my absolute favorite of the Millennium Era. We'll get to that later. But this is one that I happen to really enjoy. I like the fact that the main human protagonists basically were part of the what they call the Godzilla Prediction Network, I believe, which is like a storm chasing group, and that's something I've always been into is like storm chasing, and I'm really into tornadoes and things like that. So the fact that they kind of took that concept and put it into a Godzilla film here, that they're basically chasing Godzilla, that was really cool and really interesting to me. And then of course you had the newswoman who joined up with them as well to cover them and Godzilla. And then of course the enemy kaiju, the alien Orga, was a really cool kaiju. I liked him a lot. He had a really cool design. Put up a pretty good fight against Godzilla, and even when you saw the alien spaceship at first, and it attacked and fought Godzilla, that was pretty cool to see as well. So they had a lot of nice points to this film. A lot of stuff I did enjoy. Even the main human antagonist, Katagiri, he was over the top, but in a really good way, a way that I really enjoyed. So there was definitely a lot of positives from this movie. Obviously, like I said, this Godzilla Millennium design, certainly one that I'm not crazy about personally. But the Millennium Roar, which was introduced obviously in this movie, I happen to actually really like a lot. It's a really cool sounding take on the Godzilla roar. So that's pretty much what I can take away from that. And let's keep rolling on, because I apologize if I'm already taking an extensive amount of time here. Number 19, Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. otherwise known as Ebirah Horror of the Deep. And yes, I realize a lot of other people have this one much lower on their list. For me, though, I actually happen to enjoy the film. Had a lot of cool aspects to it. You had that basically the human terrorist group, the Red Bamboo, who had kidnapped the natives. Excuse me, kidnapped the natives of Mothra's Island, Infant Island, and were basically enslaving them to do their work, creating the that juice from the fruit that would basically keep Ebirah at bay, so that they can come and go from the island as they please. Where you found out later that they were developing atomic weapons. So that was kind of at the forefront of the film, but it was a pretty interesting concept. Of course, you had Akira Takarada in the movie, and he's absolutely fantastic. I had the privilege of meeting him a few years back, and really really nice man, and really really awesome to meet in person. I was definitely happy about that. Obviously, that was at a convention that I went to, and then the fact too that the natives of Mothra's Island this time is they usually focus on the fairies, but they actually gave them a lot more screen time. That was a different take too, including the female Dio, the female native from the island, who ended up joining with the main group, Rhoda and the others, and she was a pretty enjoyable character, and I liked the fact that they did that this time around, gave the natives a much more prominent role in this film. And that also brings us to the fact that Mothra did make a brief appearance in the movie, a little more than a cameo, I would call it. So it was cool to see her show up. Godzilla, I realized originally this was supposed to be this was intended to be a King Kong film, and then they ended up switching Kong out for Godzilla, so that's why Godzilla displays a lot of Kong's traits, because they again didn't really tweak the story to accommodate for such. But to me, it really didn't take much away from it. I still enjoyed the scenes with Godzilla, and his battle with Ebirah was pretty cool. As far as Ebirah goes, not really my favorite kaiju. He's basically, like a lot of people said, just a giant lobster. So there's really nothing too interesting about him. But he put up a pretty cool fight against Godzilla, though. So, carrying on. Number 18, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. And this was definitely a really good entry in the Heisei series. Not my absolute favorite, but a good one nonetheless. Like I said, I didn't really like Mechagodzilla's design here. This would be my least favorite of the Mechagodzilla designs, but he gave Godzilla a good run for his money. He had a lot of it had a lot of really awesome abilities, between the Mega Buster, it could fire from its mouth, and the plasma grenade cannon, which basically knocked Godzilla on his ass, and and then of course the G Crusher attack, which basically ripped apart Godzilla's secondary brain, which was on his backside, basically attached to, I think, his spine. And so that it was a pretty gruesome fight scene, that ending showdown. But it was a really well done movie. I really loved, I should say, the fact that they brought back Rodan here, who's certainly among my favorite kaiju. One that I very very much love. So it was really nice to see him added into the film. And I liked that they brought in Baby Godzilla as well. Like I said, I always kind of enjoyed the concept of Godzilla's son. So and it was done really well here in the Heisei era. So I liked Baby Godzilla. I didn't like him as much as when he grew into Little Godzilla, but I definitely liked him. He was a cute, cool little monster. And so you had some good monster action in with this. Obviously, this is when Miki Sagusa, when she started having more character development here. She was given a little more screen time, and then especially because of Baby Godzilla, her mentality towards Godzilla started changing and evolving here, and she started having more sympathy for the giant lizard. So, that was an interesting concept as well. And the other human characters were pretty enjoyable to watch as well in the film. Plus, we also got to see, after Godzilla's near-death experience, and then Rodan dying, giving his energy to Godzilla, and now we got to see him revitalized and supercharged, and unleashing his red spiral ray, which was always a really cool attack that I liked. So definitely a lot of positives here. Okay, and moving on. Number 17, Godzilla vs. Gigan. This one, some people have it a little bit higher up, others have it lower down on their list. For me, because obviously my opinions do change over time, I had this a little higher up beforehand, I would honestly say, excuse me. But I just kind of, over time, kind of realized I didn't enjoy it quite as much. The human characters are okay. The main protagonist, he's kind of weird and dopey, but I like that. It's, I kind of feel him there. So, and his girlfriend was actually really cool, the karate expert, and she was much tougher than him. So, so that was pretty cool. And then of course, you had the other girl whose brother was trapped by the aliens from Nebula Space Hunter M, who were obviously the alien antagonists of the film, and obviously they had to go rescue the brother, and so that was pretty interesting. Like I said, the human characters, they were okay. Nothing too special here. Nothing too unique about the storyline, but obviously they did introduce Gigan here, and like I said before, I really love Gigan. He's an awesome kaiju, and of course he teamed up with King Ghidorah here, who's another kaiju who I absolutely love. And it was a nice pairing, and of course they ended up taking on both Godzilla and his main pal Anguirus. Again, another kaiju that I love. So a lot of kaiju that I love in this film. So it was a nice 2-on-2 battle here, and it got pretty brutal at times. I believe the first time that you actually see Godzilla get cut up and bleed, and that was by the hands of Gigan, basically. So that's pretty interesting to note. And the aliens from Nebula Space Hunter M, I always liked the Nebula Space Hunter M aliens. I just don't really go for the fact that they're essentially giant cockroaches. I thought that was a little kooky, but not didn't really deter me too much. It's just that there was really nothing too special about the story, but it had some fun monster action. So that's my take on it. So let's carry on. Excuse me, number 16, Terror of Mechagodzilla. Now, excuse me, sorry. This was actually a really well done film. I like the fact that this was the ending of the Showa era, basically. This came out in 1975. It was a little bit darker and grittier, the feel of it than some of the previous entries. But I happen to like that. It was pretty, because it still had that Showa era feel, but done, like I said, a little bit grittier. And obviously had Akira Ifukube's music in it, which was fantastic as always. An interesting concept too is it was a 2-on-1 battle, but this time the one was Godzilla, and he had to face two monsters on his own. Both Mechagodzilla and the introduction of Titanosaurus here. And some people had mixed feelings on Titanosaurus. I actually happen to like him a lot. His roar's a little weird, but it kind of fits for him though. And like I said, he's a cool kaiju, and so this was this was a pretty interesting fight to see, and Godzilla basically had to get help from the human characters in trying to take them down. Now, obviously, you had the aliens from the third planet from the black hole, as I believe they refer to themselves. Who didn't reveal their monkey faces this time around, but they were pretty cool aliens nonetheless. And I kind of liked when Mechagodzilla was actually the alien-controlled villainous mecha, as opposed to basically a force to try and stop Godzilla, that was under the control of the humans. So I kind of like the villainous role more than the protagonist version of Mechagodzilla. So that's one thing too that I really always liked from the Showa era Mechagodzilla. Um, and then of course you had the girl who was essentially an android, and they decided to have her basically be the controller of Mechagodzilla, and how its circuitry was attached to her. So that made for an interesting concept too. So even when this time around Godzilla removed Mechagodzilla's head, he still had to, Mechagodzilla was still able to function. So he had to basically completely obliterate him here. So that was pretty cool. So like I said, so there was a lot of positives from this. Definitely a movie that I really enjoy. Alright, so carrying on. Number 15, Godzilla vs. Destroya, or as the angry video game nerd would say, Destroya! Alright, anyway, so this was a very, very good entry in the series, one that I really enjoyed. You had the whole meltdown occurring because of the incident on Birth Island. So you had Godzilla this time around as Burning Godzilla, and I really love the design of Burning Godzilla. And then of course Godzilla Jr. appears in the movie, and this of the versions of Godzilla's son, this would be my favorite, especially because this time he's grown. He was also affected by the incident on Birth Island, and basically now grew into a more, into like a sub-adult, I guess you would say, or an adolescent, really. So he took on a lot more of Godzilla's features. He could actually use atomic breath, and he was pretty tough. I really actually liked Godzilla Jr. a lot, and he put up a good fight against Destroya in Destroya's aggregate form. Actually beat him in the aggregate form. Which Destroya's aggregate form was pretty cool, but obviously nothing will beat the final form of Destroya, because like a lot of people said, he kind of looks like the devil, really evil and satanic looking, and it was really, really awesome, and had a lot of good elements. Obviously Destroya in his smaller human size form, they almost took a lot from the movie Aliens, because of the way that the SWAT team went into the building and were trying to hunt down the various Destroyer creatures at that point, and of course were attacked by them, and it had like a lot of people said, had that Aliens feel to it, and I kind of, I definitely like that. So obviously always a fan of the Alien movies. So it had a lot of cool concept, and then of course the concept of Destroya, himself, the fact that he was this Precambrian era creature that was basically mutated as a result of the oxygen destroyer, which was used on the original Godzilla for the '54 film, and now it spawned this creature Destroya, who evolved and mutated into this monster, and like I said, his final form was really, really awesome. It was saddening to see when he essentially killed off Godzilla Jr. I always get upset when I see that, but but it just showed the kind of evil monster that we were dealing with here, and but even his might was really, like they even said, and really couldn't do much against Godzilla, especially in Godzilla's burning Godzilla state here. But it was still a good battle. Destroyer had a lot of cool weapons, including his horn beam and his micro energy burst. A lot of that was really really awesome to see. But of course, I always do get really choked up at the end when, uh, well, when Godzilla does melt down. It's always a really sombering, sad scene for me to see. Um, and disappointing though the fact that he didn't get the final blow on Destroyer, that it was actually the military that took down Destroyer. So that was a bit disappointing, but. Uh, so then it kind of makes that final scene even sadder, because Godzilla doesn't get the victory in the end, and then he gets basically shot down by the Super X3, which, by the way, I've always liked all three of the versions of the Super X, and I was glad to see them with the new one in this film. The Super X. Flying aircrafts were among my favorite of the military weapons that they used, so it was really cool to see that here. Like I said, just sad to see Godzilla melt down, but I do end up smiling at the end, because after the dust clears, then you see Godzilla. Then you see the new Godzilla, who was actually Godzilla Jr., because Godzilla gave Junior his energy when he basically died, and which not only revived Godzilla Jr. but caused him to mutate into the new adult Godzilla. So it was a pretty cool scene at the end. So continuing on, I do apologize, I've already gone a long time here. This next one, though, I have to warn everybody really quick. I know this is the one that's usually at the, if not the very bottom of a lot of other people's lists, and very close, but for me, I don't really feel that way, and that is number 14, Godzilla's Revenge, otherwise known as All Monsters Attack. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, whoa, what? But for me, like I said, I actually happen to like the movie. I could relate to the main character, the kid Ichiro, who was just kind of this loner, and kind of, and he was being bullied by the other kids. It's stuff that I was able to relate to, and even though the monster action really only took place in his own dream world, but that's something else that I could relate to as well, because I would always dream a lot about. About like Godzilla and the other monsters, dream and daydream about them, and come up with like ideas for like stories or whatever in my head, So it's stuff that I could really, really relate to. So I know the whole concept here of what the idea that they were trying to push for standing up against bullies, it wasn't really executed perfectly. But it still had a positive message either way, something that I really liked. And like I said, I kind of related to the kid Ichiro. He was weird and out there, and he made weird and funny noises, but that's stuff that I can relate to. So so this so that's why I happen to personally enjoy the film. And I liked Gabara. Not the best kaiju, but still a pretty cool monster nonetheless. So that's really what I got to say as far as Godzilla's Revenge goes. On number 13, Son of Godzilla. This to me was actually a pretty good entry in the series. I know some people like it, some people don't. Just as some people like Minya or Manila, whichever you want to call him, and others don't. Like I said, I always happen to like Minya. He's not my favorite in this incarnation for Godzilla's son or surrogate son, whatever you want to call him. Not the best design. And obviously Godzilla's design here, I do agree with a lot of people, definitely among my least favorite, if not my least favorite Godzilla design. But I know what they were going for, that they wanted to try to make him look more like, resemble more of Minya, because even if they weren't actually father and son, they wanted to get the point across that they were of the same species. So I knew what they were going for there. So at least you can understand it. The human characters are really enjoyable, and plus you see them basically trapped on the island. Well, because they're needing to get done with their experiment for controlling the weather, and you see tensions boiling high, and it really was interesting to see, and you had some really enjoyable characters in there. Pretty much all the human characters I enjoyed watching in the film. The enemy kaiju, you had Kamacuras and Spiga, or Kumonga, really, as it's called. There was really kind of like Ebra, nothing really special about them. The Kamacuras, which at first there was three, and then two of them were killed off by Godzilla, so you ended up with the one before he got killed by Kumonga. Anyways, so Kamacuras just a giant praying mantis, and then Kumonga just a giant spider. So really nothing too special about them, but they were okay though. So that's my take on Son of Godzilla. 12. Godzilla 1985/84, or otherwise known as The Return of Godzilla. Oh yes, this is one that I really, really happen to like a lot. This was the first film in the Heisei era of the Godzilla series, and it was really, to me, I always really liked it. It had it went away from how the show era basically was going in that sort of silly, zany route, and went back to more of Godzilla's roots as a force, created, by the atomic bomb, and a force of nature, who causes destruction. Even though I liked the zaniness of the show era, it was kind of nice to go in this new direction that they decided to go in now. And to me, I always enjoyed the movie. And one thing I will say, and it kind of goes along with the fact that I always watch the dubs. It didn't. Whether you watch the 85 version with the scenes with Raymond Burr, or the 84 version, either the international dub, I believe it was, or the Japanese version, because those are essentially done the same. To me, though, whichever version you watch is basically a wash. I like them all the same, honestly. And it was just a really, really enjoyable movie. Godzilla was on his own here, but sometimes that's cool to watch. You don't always have to have an enemy kaiju. And they certainly made up for it here, because this is the first time that they introduce the Super X. So this was the original Super X that fought Godzilla here, and that was a pretty cool battle between Godzilla and the Super X. I know that they also say in the 85 version, it is the case that at the scene where the Russian soldier on the ship was trying to stop the nuclear missile from launching, and they kind of, in the 85 version though, made it look like he intended to launch it. So I do know that because I've seen both versions. But it was a product of its time. It was the Cold War, so I'm not really gonna nitpick like that. Godzilla's design here, I really, really love this design. This is overall my second favorite Godzilla design ever. He looks really, honestly, really terrifying here, really, really mean and menacing, and it really fit along with it. And the music in the film, even though not composed by Akira Ifukube, it was still really, really good and enjoyable. It had that sort of dark, ominous, foreboding feel to it, and it really fit in with the movie nicely. So that is Godzilla 85/84. Number 11. I know a lot of people are going to be scratching their heads too, but Godzilla Raids Again, or also known as Gigantus the Fire Monster, which I never liked that title for the American release, so whatever. This movie, though, I always happen to really, really enjoy. I know a lot of people complain about it because they were basically trying to copy off of the original film too much. So I understand where people are coming from with that. But for me, I just enjoyed it for what it was. It was the second ever Godzilla movie, the only other one other than the original that was in black and white, and I always found it entertaining. And the scenes, the monster action scenes, I guess is the first time where Godzilla does fight an enemy kaiju, and obviously we're introduced to Anguirus here, who again is a kaiju who I really love. Um, you know, this I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the monster action. I know people complain because unfortunately of the of the boo boo, if you will, with the sped up footage during the monster fight scenes, especially in Osaka. But I never really minded it because I almost felt like it had like sort of a natural feel, like if you were watching two animals fighting. I know it wasn't intended for the footage to be sped up, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. The ending, it was not bad. Nothing too spectacular with Godzilla just getting trapped in the ice, but still a really good movie that I always like, personally, like I said. Now we are at the top 10 here, folks. So these are obviously the top 10 for a reason. These are the Godzilla movies that I really, really happen to love for any future installments to try and crack the top 10. That'd be a tough cookie to do. So these are the cream of the crop for the Godzilla films for me. So without further ado, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. And this was a really, really good one. The first introduction of Mechagodzilla here. I like this film. Obviously a bit better than Terror of Mechagodzilla. I thought this one was a little bit better done. Um, you know, you have Mechagodzilla, obviously created from the aliens, from from I think they always call themselves the third planet from the black hole. But it first shows up as fake Godzilla, and at that point, only Anguirus realized that it was not really Godzilla, and challenged fake Godzilla to a fight in which he lost. Got his jaw snapped by fake Godzilla and had to essentially retreat into the ground just to get away. And then later on, fake Godzilla gets confronted by the real Godzilla, and that was a really cool scene to see. And then, of course, Godzilla blasts fake Godzilla's skin apart, and then of course he ends up having to be revealed fully as Mechagodzilla, and that whole scene was really cool, really well done, as was the movie. Very enjoyable human characters, you know, and really just a really good entry in the series. And of course, with King Caesar, really awesome monster, one I really like a lot, and him teaming up with Godzilla, that made for a really good fight at the end. And this Godzilla design, this was the Mecha Goji, which is basically along with Terror of Mechagodzilla, where they kind of corrected some of the follies I felt from the Megalon design, because they kind of basically just changed some of the facial features, making the eyebrows in a shaped in a different direction to give him a much meaner look, and they made his teeth sharper, and to me it just totally changed the design around. I know it sounds weird, but that's how I felt, and this design actually is among my favorite of the Showa era, and of course overall. So that was a really nice nice touch that they did as well. So continuing on. Number 9, Godzilla versus Biollante. Ooh, yes, I really, really like this one. This is a very underrated gem in the series, as a lot of people have stated. This is a really, really awesome movie, and the design here, the 89 slash 91 design, because they're essentially the same. The Bio Goji, King Gido Goji, I should say. this is my all-time favorite Godzilla design. You know, when I think of Godzilla, boom, bam. You know, this is what I think of basically, and this, everything about this movie is just really, really awesome. I love Biollante. She's a great kaiju. Her her rose form is nothing really special. Nothing too new, nothing too particular about it. Obviously, she's got the vines with the mouths on them that extend out and can do most of the fighting. But she didn't put up too much of a battle there. But then her final form was so massive and bulky and just really, really awesome. She had the long crocodile-like snout with this super sharp serrated teeth and really was just an awesome monster. I enjoyed the fight scene at the end. It wasn't super long, but it was enjoyable for what it was with her and Godzilla. And obviously the vines can spew out acid, and even her. And then of course her main head was able to spew out the acid beam as well, and of course she had the energy sac, which was able to kind of restore her anytime that she was taking damage, essentially. Because she was created from the cells of Godzilla and a plant, and then even Dr. Shiragami's dead daughter Erica, basically had her soul instilled into Biollante, and that was a really cool concept. So a lot of stuff that I liked in here. You had the Super X2, and Godzilla had some good battles against that. Really, really enjoyable human characters, both the protagonists and the antagonists. I pretty much like them all, and just so many good things I can say about this. I know I need to keep rolling on here. I apologize at how long this is going. Great. Godzilla Final Wars. This is far and away my favorite of the Millennium Era Godzilla films. I know some people really like this, some people don't like it. For me, obviously, I'm in the group that happens to really enjoy Final Wars. It was a nice callback to the Showa era, which I know is what they intended. Had a lot of zaniness to it, and, a lot of silly plot lines, but it was just really cool to watch. Even with the mutant humans that you had, kind of having that X-Men feel to it, with the main character Ozaki, he was enjoyable, and I liked. Then you also had Don Fry's character of Captain Gordon. He was really awesome in the film, and just a really cool, enjoyable, fun movie. I always felt Godzilla's design here. Honestly, this was my favorite of the Millennium Era designs. I know some people like it, some don't. I happen to like it. Yeah, the face is a bit elongated, but it's not terrible. The eyes, his like orangish glowing eyes, were absolutely awesome. I do like the spikes here a lot, and you had some good monster action. You had a lot of monsters show up, and especially mainly ones from the Showa era, and that was great for me because, like I said, the Showa era overall is my favorite. Excuse me. And I do know that the monster action, some of the fight scenes were a bit limited, which was something that took away from it a bit. But I kind of understand where they were coming from because you had so many different kaiju showing up that you couldn't give too much screen time to them other than a lot of cameo appearances, because then you'd end up with like a 4-hour movie or something. So it was just because of really time constraints why screen time had to be limited. So it's understandable, at least from that aspect. But like I said, this is definitely a film that I love. Now, King Kong versus Godzilla, the meeting of the two legendary beasts, and two of my all-time favorite kaiju, obviously. I saw King Kong before I had seen Godzilla. I was from a very early age, watched King Kong and became a big fan of the King Kong movies, and then a few years later, is when I got into Godzilla. So I grew up with both of them. Like I said, I started with Kong, obviously became a bigger Godzilla fan, but I really love both of these monsters, and it was just epic to see them. clash on screen, the true clash of the Titans, as you will. So, um, and this was fantastic. Like I said, I can't wait for Godzilla versus Kong in 2020. I don't think it'll live up to the original, but still looking forward to it nonetheless. But this was a really well done movie. Both monsters had pretty adequate screen time, and it was a nice blending too, because you had like the story that's familiar of Kong with the group from the pharmaceutical company, the main characters who ventured to the island, Faroe Island, and wanted to try to find evidence of the giant beast Kong on there, and then wanted to see if they could capture him and bring him back to Japan for a show. So that was, that was what you'd expect from a King Kong movie. So, and that was nice that they did that. So it was like a blending, because then you also had Godzilla rampaging. He emerged from the iceberg that he was trapped in from Godzilla Raids Again. So that was some nice continuity there. And then, of course, him rampaging through Japan had the nice Godzilla movie feel. So, like I said, it was a really good blending. The first scene where you see them meet up, there's really nothing too special about it. But the final showdown scene was really, really great and a lot of fun to watch. And I know a lot of people say it was weird that Kong had the boost of power from electricity, but that was because of some changes. Originally, the film was going to entail the Frankenstein monster, who obviously gets charged uh, from electricity, and you had some changes along the way. Originally, they wanted to do maybe Godzilla versus the Frankenstein monster, then maybe Kong versus the Frankenstein monster, and then ended up with Godzilla and Kong squaring off. So you had some changes along the way that kind of affected it, but nonetheless, though, to me, it made for an interesting concept, and to kind of see why Kong ended up being a match for Godzilla, and basically ended the fight in a draw. So, like I said, just so awesome to see this film, and definitely one that I really love. Now, 6, Mothra versus Godzilla. This was absolutely an awesome film in the franchise. Godzilla emerges after the hurricane here, goes on a rampage. Love his design here. He just looks so menacing. Definitely one of the best designs from the Showa era and overall, in my opinion. And so you have all that going on. Then you've got the whole human greed thing with the human antagonists who basically bought Mothra's egg when it landed on the shores of Japan, and put it in the incubator, and wanted to basically display it and make money off of it. And even with the main human protagonists, who were accompanied by the Mothra twin fairies, could not plead with these people to return Mothra's egg. So it just played on the concept of human greed, but it was done really well. It was a really well done story. When you see Mothra and Godzilla meet up and clash, it's a good fight. Obviously, we end up with the twin Mothra larva at the end, having to take up the fight after the adult Imago Mothra passes away, essentially. And then they basically have to stop Godzilla's rampage, and it was just just a really, really awesome film. Again, Akira Takarada in the role, and fabulous as always. So there's just so many good things I could say about this. And now we're reaching the top 5, so we're really high up now on the list. Number 5, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. This is pound for pound my favorite of the Heisei era films. Had a lot of great concepts in it. The whole time traveling aspect, which the Futurians, as they're called, use that to their advantage, because they wanted to take Godzilla out of the picture and replace him with their own monster, which this time around, Space Godzilla wasn't a space monster. He was these three cute little creatures called Dorats that were put on Lagos Island, and when they performed the atomic bomb tests there. The creatures were merged and formed into King Ghidorah. So a little different of a take. I don't like it as much as the Space Godzilla Space Monster concept of King Ghidorah, but I do happen to like it nonetheless. And King Ghidorah was still a force to be reckoned with. I really like the whole time travel aspect. I like the android M11 was a really cool character in the movie. You saw one of the Futurians, Emiko, had her change of heart and decided because she was a native of Japan, she did not want to see her country be destroyed. So she basically turned on the others and joined up with the human protagonists of the movie. So had a lot of good stuff going on with it. And then of course Godzilla, who was the Godzillasaurus, was removed from Lagos Island, placed under the sea. But due to a nuclear submarine that had sank, I believe in the 70s, I believe they said, it actually caused the Godzillasaurus to mutate anyways into Godzilla. So they never really prevented Godzilla's birth. And I believe when you watch the Wikizilla time travel debacle, they basically explained that the Godzillasaurus on Lagos Island was not actually the original Godzilla. So that one was always intended that it was the '84 Godzilla, and basically the Futurians created it by their time traveling mess up, if you will. And then of course, this time around, once King Ghidorah attacked and the humans wanted to try and stop him, they sent another nuclear sub down to try and actually blast the Godzillasaurus to create a new Godzilla, not realizing that Godzilla was already had already been created, basically been mutated into what he was. So the extra energy from that nuclear sub just caused him to grow in size and become more powerful. So that was really cool to see. And then of course at the end, after King Ghidorah is defeated, then they realize Godzilla's rampaging and they have to stop him. So Emiko goes back to the future and restores King Ghidorah as Mecha Ghidorah, or Mecha King Ghidorah, whichever you want to call him, to fight Godzilla in the final showdown. That was really cool to see as well. So a lot of good stuff here. And moving along now. Number 4, Godzilla King of the Monsters / Gojira. Just as with the 85-84 Godzilla, to me I know a lot of people will disagree, but it's a wash. Whichever version you prefer. I like them both the same, honestly. Obviously I grew up watching Godzilla King of the Monsters, so that's the version that I'm more accustomed to, the one with Raymond Burr, and I kind of like it because it kind of feels like you're getting the original story but told from his eyes. I know he's very exposition heavy, but I didn't mind it, and I it never really took away from the film for me. And there's still essentially the same movie. I know in King of the Monsters they just try to make it more of just a monster movie, as opposed to a a product of what happens, from the horrors of atomic bomb testing, or the horrors of the atomic bomb, I should say, which was obviously what the filmmakers of Toho were originally going for. What Ishiro Honda was originally going for with the film. That Godzilla was basically this force of destruction spawned by the atomic bomb, and obviously the events of World War II were still very fresh in their minds, so this was basically to speak out against that. So obviously the series ended up changing a lot since this movie. This was a very dark, very serious take. But like I said, though, whether it's because obviously I've seen both, to me, at least just to me anyways, whether you watch the American version or which was the '56 release, or the original '54 Gojira, I like them both the same. I like them for what each of them are worth. And like I said, To me, I enjoy them. I love Godzilla's design here. This is actually my favorite. This is the Shodai Goji. This design, the original Godzilla. This is my favorite from the Showa era. One of my favorites overall. He really looks menacing and mean, and you can see that he looks mutated. And his rampaging through Tokyo. Just absolutely awesome, and the effects were as my friend always said, has always said, well ahead of its time. Really well done here, and you know, I just there's just so many good things about this. The human characters you really feel for. Obviously, is we have Akira Takarada as the part of Ogata. Always, like I said, always awesome. Akihiko Hirata as Dr. Sarazawa, who's the one that you really, really feel sorry for, the scientist who invented the oxygen destroyer, and basically ended up being plagued by. Now you have Godzilla menacing the world, and his very dangerous weapon. He was left with basically no choice, that he had to use the weapon, but he ends up sacrificing himself in the end because he doesn't want his weapon falling into the wrong hands. But knows that Godzilla has to be stopped. So it's a very leaves you with that very somber feel at the end, but really an awesome movie. Obviously the original Godzilla movie, the one that started it all, and just an absolutely amazing film. And there's just, when I was younger, I used to not like it as much, especially because Godzilla didn't fight another monster, etc., etc. But as I grew older, I really grew to appreciate and now love this film. And obviously, have it as number 4 on my list. So, so definitely a highly recommended movie. Now, continuing on, we are at the top 3. Number 3, Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, otherwise known as Invasion of Astro Monster. Oh, yes, 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 I love this movie. And it's zany and out there, zany and out there, and I freaking love it. What can I say, because like I said, that fits in with my personality. The sinister Exilians from Planet X wanting to take over the Earth, and want to use Godzilla, Rodan, and King Ghidorah to aid in their plans, and just made for a really excellent movie. Again, Akira Takarada in the starring role here, along with Nick Adams, who's also an awesome actor, and I love his character of Glenn. And Glenn and Fuji's partnership is really interesting to watch. And just everything about this is great. I love the Exilians. I love their outfits that they wear. I know Godzilla's screen time is limited in this, but whatever you do get out of it is certainly worth it. Pretty much the only time, as far as I can recollect, that you'll see Godzilla fighting in outer space, when he and Rodan are taken to Planet X and fight off King Ghidorah, and you got Godzilla's famous dancing scene at the end, which some people don't like. I happen to love it. I would celebrate like that myself if I get really happy about something. But anyway, that's a story for another day. So a lot of great stuff in there. The battle at the end of the movie with Godzilla and Rodan taking on King Ghidorah on Earth was a good little sequence as well. You got to see Godzilla doing some boxing, and then the two of them basically. Rodan picks Godzilla up to slam into King Ghidorah and knock him over the cliff. That was just awesome. And like I said, just so many things about this movie that I really happen to enjoy. I do want to keep moving on, because again, I do apologize that this is taking so long. But let's carry on. Number 2, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. This was the predecessor, obviously, to Monster Zero. Excuse me. And this one I actually do like a little bit better. This is one that I really love. It's hard for me to find too many flaws with it. I know you had the subplot of that whole espionage thing with the assassins trying to kill trying to kill the princess, and at the same time she had suffered amnesia because she had jumped out of the plane and somehow survived, and then uh, basically thought of herself as a Martian, or I believe in the Japanese version, she thought that she was from Venus, and she somehow had the power to prophetize. And I don't know that it was ever actually officially stated, but I think that might have actually been the case, that she was from outer space. But over time, her people had basically forgotten their ways, and basically just settled in as Earthlings. So that was really cool. And then, of course, at the end, the assassin, the main assassin, grazed her when he shot at her. So the bullet grazed her and returned her back to normal, basically. So you had that subplot going on, but I didn't mind it too much. But the monster action was certainly first and foremost, and obviously here Godzilla, up to this point, had been a villain in the series, and so at first he shows up that way, and of course Rodan returns, since his first appearance. And at first they're kind of attacking each other and going at it, and then when you get the Mothra fairies, who send for Mothra, and they feel that the best solution here, because now you've got the introduction, obviously in this film, of King Ghidorah, who's again a kaiju that I really really love. Came to Earth in a meteor and emerged in a really cool scene, by the way. And now you've got this greater threat, so they called Mothra in, and their plan was to have Mothra convince Godzilla and Rodan to team up with her to try and stop King Ghidorah. So that was a really interesting concept, and this was when you would see Godzilla shift from being a villain to being more of the hero, or at least an anti-hero. Anyways, so I know a lot of people don't like the scene when Mothra has to try and talk to Godzilla and Rodan and convince them to help her. And you have the twin fairies kind of explaining what they're saying to the main human protagonists of the film. But I always kind of liked it. It was goofy, but I liked it, though. I thought it was fun to watch. And then Mothra, after she can't convince Godzilla and Rodan, she tries to take on King Ghidorah herself. But then once she's outmatched, clearly, that's when Godzilla and Rodan see that and decide to join in the fight. And the three of them take on King Ghidorah and are able to basically fend him off to where he retreats into outer space. And that was an absolutely fantastic showdown scene. Not my all-time favorite, but one that I really, really love. And that was the one thing with Monster Zero was kind of a disappointment, is the fact that Mothra was not in that film. Originally she was intended to be, but because of budgetary reasons she was cut. So that was a bit of a disappointment, but I do love that film. But this one, though, I really love. This is like I said, this is definitely second on my list. And now that brings us to the number one here, folks. Obviously, if you've been watching all along, you'll already know what the number one is. For me, this is not only my favorite Godzilla film, but this is actually my favorite movie, period. To be honest with you, I know a lot of people are going to be kind of not understanding that, but hey, I'm really weird and nerdy, and that's just how I am. So without further ado, Destroy All Monsters. Oh yeah, I really really love this one. I know that the movie itself was more focused on the human characters, and you had more limited monster action time. But the human characters were really great, especially the commander of the Moonlight SY-3, which was an awesome ship, by the way. But he was a total badass, and he didn't back down from anything, including you had the alien villains in this one, the Keloks, who wanted to take over the Earth. But he, even against them, he would not back down, and he fought them, to stop them, and they their whole plan was to take control over the monsters of Earth, and use them to basically take over. So that's when he and his companions had to venture out and basically try to stop this whole plot from unfolding. And once they did get back control over the monsters, they brought them down to the final showdown scene. And even the scenes prior to this, though, all the monster action was really great, all the destruction scenes and everything. But then once we got to this final showdown scene here, where the Earthlings gathered up the all the kaiju. To take on the Keylocks and destroy their base. Oh yeah, the Keylocks ended up resorting to calling in or to bringing in King Ghidorah, obviously the space monster, to come down and try to stop the monsters of Earth, which is not a very smart plan, because there's no way King Ghidorah was gonna stop all the Godzilla and all the other monsters. But nonetheless, though. Oh my goodness, this final showdown scene. This to me was the meaning of life, folks. This, ladies and gentlemen, was my all-time favorite monster fight scene, and I just really, really loved it. I know all the monsters didn't really take part in the fight, but at least they all did show up. You know, you had Varan at least showing up on scene. You had Manda, Baragon. None of them really took part, but they did show up, like I said, on the battlefield. And then the main participants who fought against King Ghidorah, obviously you had Godzilla, and then Anguirus and Gorosaurus. Were the main combatants who took on King Ghidorah. But you had Minya, who added the final blow in the fight. You had Rodan, who took part in the action a little bit at the beginning. And then, of course, even Mothra and Kumonga, used their silk web against King Ghidorah. So it was still a really nice team effort, and just a really great fight scene. And the monster action, in this, I just love it all. Obviously it's not going to be a perfect film. Nothing ever is, but for me, it's just my favorite. It's just something that I really love. I can't explain it. Like I said, I know a lot of people won't understand, why this is my favorite movie ever. A lot of people will look at me like I'm from planet Zonkolo or something, but but hey, what can I say? I'm weird and I'm a nerd, and this is what I love. And so that pretty much brings us to the end of this list. This ended up being much longer than I intended. I really do apologize, folks. So anybody that's still watching, say is thank you so very much for watching this. I definitely do appreciate it. Again, this is just my personal opinion, just my personal preference. I know I differ a lot from a lot of other people that have ranked these films, but hey, that's why we've all got our own opinions, and that's why it's nice to be able to discuss this kind of stuff. Like I said, I love Godzilla, my biggest fandom, and it's great for me to be able to talk about it. So I do hope to make more of these videos, as we continue on here and keep the party going here. So, but once again, thank you for watching, and take care of yourselves, everybody, and sayonara.